All right, we're pushing into a couple minutes past the top of the hour and wanted to thank everybody for joining us for our webinar. Today's topic is Stop Adding Vehicles and Start Winning More Trips, a broker's playbook for smarter NEMT growth. Good morning, everybody. My name is Peter Hicks. I'm the Executive Director of NEMTAC, joined today by Ed Platt, Rizwan Mustafa, and William Retherford. I'll let them do their introductions in just a minute. I wanted to thank everybody for joining the webinar today. Tell you a little bit about NEMTAC. Obviously, you got to us through signing up for the webinar. NEMTAC's the ANSI accredited standard development organization that covers the NEMT industry. We host national NEMT education programs and certifications. We accredit providers and develop operational standards. We host the NEMTAC National Provider Registry. We also work with industry to collaborate, provide cross-provider, broker, health plan, technology, all the stakeholders as we develop standards and guidance documents to help further the industry. The focus of NEMTAC is on safety, quality, accountability, operational excellence across the industry. It's important to us that we all stay focused on the passengers that rely on our services in order to get to and from their healthcare services. One of the things that's important is that the NEMT industry is shifting. Brokers increasingly evaluate measurable operational performance. They look at the reliability, consistency, and that influences the trip allocations as you, as a NEMT provider, providing services. Your data quality impacts your reputation and how much they trust your organization. Compliance is obviously a huge part of what's going on, and it becomes an operational differentiator. So sustainable growth depends on operational maturity, not just how many vehicles you have. Bottom line is your growth follows your performance, not just your capacity. So in today's discussion, we'll talk about how brokers evaluate performance, what high-performing providers do differently, some common operational gaps limiting your growth, how your data, your visibility, and your consistency actually impacts you, and the practical operational strategies providers can apply now. So I'll hand this over to the folks from Momentm and stop sharing my screen. Let them put their deck up and do their introductions.
So I am William Retherford. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for WellTrans. We are an NEMT broker headquartered out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We currently cover transportation for roughly 1.5 million Medicaid, Medicare recipients from multiple managed care organizations across the country, some of the largest players in that space. And then we currently process in excess of about 50,000 trips a month currently that we're working with NEMT providers to be able to handle.
And my name is Ed Platt. I'm the Director of Customer Success for Momentm. We're an NEMT software vendor and been here about 1.5 years. Prior to that, I was also a Chief Operating Officer for a regional broker for NEMT, doing about 3.5 million rides a year. In my background, I've also helped run a transportation provider in Connecticut for about 1 year. And prior to that, working for a health plan payer that used NEMT services for about 14 years. Thank you.
First, we'll talk about how brokers decide what trips are going to be assigned to which providers. We'll also discuss what the top providers do differently, why providers miss out, and what to do next. And from there, I believe we have a poll for you guys. And if you can start by answering the first question, what's the biggest challenge in growing trips today? Got some options there for you. Getting a few responses here now.
What I can throw in while we're waiting here, what we see is across most transportation providers, the ones that are growing the fastest are the ones that aren't necessarily adding vehicles, but more operating differently and more efficiently. I call it, digitizing yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ed. I think there's somewhat of a common misconception about what it is that brokers really do in the relationship, and I think that's why I think providers sometimes struggle to work with them. The managed care organizations that hire brokers and the states that hire brokers or the regions that hire to operate them, yes, they want them to have call centers. Yes, they want them to dispatch trips. And yes, they want them to do the other functions of transportation management. But the real reason why they hire brokers like WellTrans, like Verita, like other companies to be able to come in and do things is primarily because they want a standardized claims processing system. So everything that transportation does comes through to them in the same way. But two, they really hire us for risk management. At the end of the day, you have sick people traveling in vehicles for medical services that adherence to those medical services costs a lot of money to those insurers and to those state programs. And what they want to make sure is that there is a reliable risk management approach that says when trips are distributed, they will get consistently delivered. Not necessarily, the other functions all have to go along, but that risk management component is the biggest reason why they hire brokers in the first place. And so when we're looking at and evaluating traffic growth, the functions that make up risk management are a lot of what our decision making criteria is about how we distribute trips.
Sounds good. So on our poll, we have a tie for the two highest. Getting more broker volume at 38%, and same thing with hiring driver capacity, both at 38%. And then after that, we have managing operational efficiency and then compliance. Technology and systems was not a factor in the response to this poll.
Although I think technology probably underlines some of your provider momentum and some of your compliance related responses, I suspect, are probably also tied up in those as well. So,
Yeah. And we see the same thing here. Providers who focus on consistency and data and operational controls are generally the ones that grow faster. Data integrity and data capturing digital, as I mentioned before, is super, super important. If you're doing things on paper and manually, they get ruined, they get lost, hard to find, and that causes, issues for compliance. And, if there's a complaint, that the brokers are obligated to research and look into. And if you're a provider that takes time to do that, there becomes a fear that, you don't have everything in a row. So that's critically important. Then another thing I would say is just adding vehicles adds cost immediately, but adding reliability and making sure that you can do what you have very well, you'll grow over time. I can almost guarantee it. So quality is uber important to getting more trips. If
yeah,
you ask for a lot and you don't do them well, likely you're going to get reduced. Sorry,
yeah,
William.
no, I couldn't agree more with that particular comment. Your mothers always tell to you when you're children that it takes a lot of hard work to be able to build a reputation, but it only takes one incident to be able to ruin one. And that's certainly true in the broker world as well. If you don't have the ability to adequately manage your fleet, track where they are, resolve circumstances when they come up, and adequately predict what your tomorrow is going to look like, when you give inconsistent data to us or inconsistent requests to us as a broker, we're going to interpret that as those trips are at risk and you don't inherently understand what you need to be able to do to get those things involved. So as a result of that, we're going to reduce the gross volume to you because, as I said, our number one responsibility is as risk managers. And if you are unable to quantify and efficiently manage that risk when it's distributed to you, we really don't have any other choice but to reduce the volume to you to be in connection with it. I mean, I get calls every day from people who go, "Hey, how do I get these 30-mile in-car trips, 40-mile in-car trips, 50-mile in-car trips?" And my general response to us was, "Well, you failed to deliver 3-4 mile trips yesterday. Why would I give you a 50-mile trip and put that at risk when you haven't shown a consistent reliability that you can be on time for the 3 or 4 less than 10-mile trips that you already had?" So there definitely an earned privilege component to that. I think the other thing is that everybody, you got to be careful about what you look for to be able to grow and manage that. everybody instinctively goes, yeah, I want that trip I pick up that I only got to go 4 deadhead miles to get, and the guy's in the car for 50 miles, and I get the return trip back. But the reality is, brokers have no control over when those trips are scheduled, when they'll come up, if they come up at all, and whether or not they'll come up in an area that you service or not. The better thing to do is to focus on what are trips that I can reliably deliver, that I can efficiently get my car back into service with, so that I can make up with volume. I can create a good track record. Then we can rely on you when those other longer trips come up down the road and be able to deploy them for you in a responsible way that we're confident will get delivered.
Yeah. And if Rizwan, if you want to move to the next slide, we can continue on. I put all three quiz questions in this or the Q&A questions live, so I relaunched that. So please feel free to answer the second question. With this, in the broker framework, walk us through what causes providers to move up or down in your list. Is it just the performance, or are other elements part of that?
Well, so I would say initially, to get in the door and really to start that relationship about what kind of volume you can handle, out of the four ones in here, I would say compliance is the most significant. Our provider relationship, you're not going to get a trip. We're not going to discuss what your trip volume is. We're not going to discuss rates or revenues or anything else associated with it if you can't show us that you can keep every driver properly documented, every vehicle properly documented, every vehicle's inspection requirements up, all the basic things that you have to be able to do to operate in a particular market. If there's uncertainty for that, or you don't know where your documents are, or you're searching around for details that relate to your compliance to operate in the network, I can assure you all work related to you stops until you get caught up and get those things under control. So if you don't have controls in place that manage your compliance and ensure that they are coming up reliably. Certificates of insurance is another big one. I mean, we usually send out one reminder when the certificate of insurance is about to come up, but if you don't heed it and you don't get the new one over to us, we're going to shut it off at the expiration of the previous certificate of insurance. And it happens all the time. People call us and go, wait, I have this. But if you're responsible for it, it's the least likely thing to be able to disrupt your service. So I would say compliance is sort of that first step. If you're not ready to manage that compliance component, you're probably not ready to enter into a relationship with a broker, because there's no broker that I know of, including us, that are going to be willing to allow you to continue or even take the first trip until you get over that hurdle. So be organized, know what your requirements are, ask good questions, keep good records, get an automated system that allows you to be able to maintain the dates and the renewals on those types of things on a regular basis. That will get you trips the fastest, and it will avoid any disruption to your trips as you go along. The other two big pieces that I would say, just out of the framework as it's described here, are on-time performance and reliability. If you are consistently showing up late for pickups, we're going to notice that really quickly. And our assumption is if you cannot get to your pickups on time, it is because you cannot handle the volume that has been distributed to you as a provider. So we're arbitrarily going to reduce that volume until we see your on-time pickups. A lot of people try to cram trips in and cram as many trips as they can get in, thinking that the logic is it's my best chance of pulling the most amount of miles today. But the reality is if you're not giving yourself enough buffer to get from place to place, and you're consistently not showing up on time for your scheduled pickups, the reality of it is that volume, even if you, no matter what you picked up that day, it's going to go down over time, because we're going to stop assigning them to you. That returns to reliability too. The other fact that I think of in terms of reliability is, do you have an ability to be able to project your availability in the future? If you're constantly calling us every day and going, oh, we're short trips today, we need more trips. Or, hey, I can't deliver these 5 trips I accepted yesterday, I'm going to have to turn these trips back. You're telling us you don't have the ability to understand your own demand curve. You don't have your ability to understand what you're capable of supplying and what you're scheduling. And then we're going to arbitrarily downshift how many trips we're going to make available to you, because you don't seem to be able to manage the volume appropriately. So having the appropriate management tools that you can look at and go, here's my cars, here's what I can realistically do, here's how we can follow up, this is what we can move around, take, deny, request. we're always okay with, hey, we'd like you to take trip A. Look, I can't fit it in the schedule. That means you were looking at things realistically and objectively and made a good decision. But when you take everything that comes your way and then just kick it back when you can't deliver, we run out of patience for that pretty quickly, and your volumes are just going to keep going down until it stops.
That makes good sense. Just a quick assist for the audience. If you have a question that you'd like the panel to address, if you use the Q&A function in your toolbar, that'll help us be able to make sure that we get it to the entire panel. Some of them are coming directly to us as individuals, and it makes it harder for the group to answer your question that may come up. If we can move to the next slide, please. So how much does data quality really impact your decisions as you're looking at your NEMT provider network?
Well, I feel like it really underlies at the basis all those things we were just talking about, which is on time, reliability, compliance, those types of things. If you're managing, I mean, it's 2026. If you're managing this on spreadsheets or logbooks, you're a high risk to a high volume risk manager like us. I mean, the reality is that while fraud, waste, and abuse has always been something monitored in every market by every program, the focus that the federal government, state governments, insurers are putting on transportation and fraud, waste, and abuse is growing every single day. And the reality is if you're not able to adequately report with supporting data, your pickups, your drop-offs, with GPS included data, with cameras in the car that show if there's an incident in conjunction with it. I can show you video and film that this was not a problem for us. If you haven't invested in those things today to maintain a consistent ability to prove with verifiable data what the trips are and what you're taking, one is it's going to hurt your reputation and the amount of trips that we're going to deliver to you. But eventually, quite honestly, it's going to be a barrier to service. It's going to become a compliance issue, just like any other compliance, registration, insurance, everything else, a compliance issue. Being able to produce reliable data about your trip in a consistent way to verify what you are doing is coming in the very near future if your brokers aren't enforcing it now. For example, in our organization, while we still have organizations that are making that and partners that are making that migration, our basic default situation right now is if we get a complaint and you can't produce video or GPS data, we're going to assume the complaint's valid. That's it. There's no defense to that because we're not going to play the he said, she said game. You are professional business operators in a high risk medical environment. You should have invested in these tools to be able to protect yourself and improve your trips by this point in time. If you can't do that, then we're not going to do it for you.
Understandable.
I have two things to add, Peter, if I can. One thing that I think is William is emphasizing, and I echo, when I was at my brokerage is data integrity and consistency and being able to readily have it available. There are plenty of systems that allow that. And I think what I've heard, a lot of providers feel like that's an expense that they can't afford. I would argue that it's an expense you have to have and you can afford not to. Because if you are dragging your feet on response times, as William just said, and there's a he said, she said thing going on, you need the ability to prove yourself that you were in the right potentially and in order to get paid sometimes or have your trip volume reduced. So it's not really a nice to have. I think it's an absolute must. And as William also touched upon, and this was happening in my area as well, states and health plans are demanding that real-time connectivity and AVL, digital footprint on all rides, and manually doing that and without software, I don't think it's going to be an option for much longer. And then the second thing I wanted to throw in here is communication. You're going to hear that more in this upcoming section, but I'm going to emphasize it now. So everything that we talked about in transportation isn't perfect, right? You can have a vehicle breakdown, you can have a driver, something happens there. There could be a bad accident, there could be major weather patterns, whatever. You need to communicate with, your broker in this case to let them know something's going on. They don't expect perfection necessarily. They know there are going to be issues, but if you hide it or you don't communicate it, then you're going to get caught in trouble. And things are going to get missed or complaints will happen, and that's a large, big no-no. You need to prevent complaints and bad experiences on your ride. So if you communicate in advance, maybe just one day you can lower the volume so you can account for that and go right back up the next day. That's much better than having members wait or be stranded. Those are major factors that I always looked at, and I'm sure William and all brokers do when they're deciding where they're going to put volume. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And quite honestly, the price on all of those things, GPS enabled dispatching systems, camera system, are dropping every single day. And really, it would be, I mean, to justify and say, hey, I'm trying to save this much money by not investing in these systems. And a lot of times you can get them on a monthly basis for what's probably the cost of a couple trips, and quite honestly. And so I'm going to put all my risk at trips because I'm not willing to invest that amount of money to have accuracy forecasting, know where my vehicles are. Nothing drives a broker more crazy than to call you and say, hey, vehicle hasn't arrived yet. You say they're 5 minutes out, and 20 minutes later, they're still not there. It's a fundamental basis about how we evaluate you as a provider. And our assumption is always going to come down. You can't handle the volume you have when you make mistakes like that. When you have a data system that allows you to predict it, if you're 20 minutes out, you're 20 minutes out. We get it. But understanding, knowing that, being able to quantify it, we can work with you. When you don't know it, you don't have that data, you don't know where your car is, you don't know what those things are going on. You're setting off those risk indicator lights for us, and we're going to manage that risk by volume reduction.
yeah.
Makes good sense.
And the other thing to think about also on data, really is your data is your reputation when you're not performing a ride, right? It's going to linger forever behind the scenes. And when you're not performing a real live trip, what are people looking at? The data, the quality, the complaints, the turnbacks, etc. So that is uber critical.
And I would agree with that. Um, if the audience could help us finish out the poll on this, how confident are you in your data accuracy today? I see a few people have answered those. If you'd go ahead and score yourself, it's anonymous to us, but it's interesting data that helps inform our conversation here.
Yeah. And
I would
that's,
say that from my experience here lately, we spent a fair amount of time with CMS, um, between the National Association of Medicaid Directors and the CMS Quality Conference. The data elements are an important part, even at the federal level, and they're not just looking at this as a nice to have, it's essential. So if you're not interconnected, if you're not having a data platform that's connected to your broker, that gives you those reports, then you're falling behind the eight ball.
Well, there was legislation introduced in Congress last week that that would make it so that Medicaid and Medicare could deny claims outright that didn't have GPS data associated with it. Now that has not been enacted into law at this point in time. It's still at the committee level, but I mean they're actively considering now saying if you can't do these things, if you cannot produce this data and you cannot produce it reliably, you are no longer eligible to be able to take Medicare and Medicaid trips. So I don't think we're not talking a decade down the road. We're talking about if you're not making plans now, at some point in time, you're going to be behind the curve.
Yeah, I'd reasonably say within the next 2 years, the legislation is going to catch up with the momentum that's happening right now. Sorry for the play on words, but that's kind of the direction we're headed. And so folks need to start planning for it. There are a couple of questions in the chat as well, but just to come back to our initial quiz question, how confident are you in your data accuracy? Looks like we have 14% at a level 2, leaning towards the not confident. We have 43% at moderately confident, 29% at a level 4, and then 14% at very confident.
You know,
I would say,
the irony is that I look positively at those people who say less confident, because the reason they probably put that answer is because they've taken the time to evaluate their situation and it's raised question marks in their mind. That's what everybody should be doing. Take the time to evaluate how accurately, how you can report, how it works in your system, what your oversight looks like. And if you have concerns, then identify them and address them. If you're not evaluating that, you've probably got big holes and it's probably going to show up in delivery.
yeah, and I would say if you feel like you're below a 4, it's probably impacting your volume with brokers, frankly. Um, I know it certainly did with me. If there was inconsistencies, the trust and the reliability of that gets lowered. And that forms your overall quality score when brokers and their teams are assessing where to distribute trips in a particular area. I could take one of the questions. I don't know if we're going to wait till the end or go throughout here, but it's
Well,
someone asked. Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, yeah, I would go ahead. These are relevant to where we're at in the slide deck.
Yeah, the first one is saying taking all into consideration, camera, GPS, software. What about the small business? To me, the biggest gain of all that is if when you make those investments is prevention, really. So I'll go in the camera and the GPS situation. There will be issues where complaints made against you, and if you don't have a camera, you have no way to prove, your side of the story. So likely the state, the health plan, the broker will be forced to take the member's word, and it'll kind of be against you. But if you have a camera that disputes that, immediately you have proof that you were in the right. In that case, you hope. So a small camera expense will save you from that kind of quality hit, potentially not getting paid for the ride, lower volume. You can see where that can compound itself very quickly for a small expense. The software is another one. Um, I say this all the time to clients who are looking at oh, how can I afford this? Well, I think pretty easily, because you could become more efficient in your operations and you can take more volume without doing anything else. So if you frankly can take a couple more rides a day, there you go. There's the cost of the software and then some. And now you have a return on your investment. And then to the point of data that we talked about, if there is a complaint and the cameras are not really what's needed, and if you have GPS and AVL tied to where you were that says you were on time or not, that also proves your point of on-time performance, or that
Absolutely.
you were where you needed to be on time.
Absolutely. And we talk about a trust relationship with a provider. If we call you and say, hey, we have this trip that just came up, is it possible that you can take this trip? Well, when we make that call to you, we're A, telling you that we need your help, and B, that we think that you're somebody who may be able to help us. If your answer is you can't evaluate your traffic flow and your scheduling pattern enough to make that determination, I can tell you we're only going to make that call once. The next time we're going to make it to somebody else that we can get on the phone and can go, yeah, I could get them by 1 p.m. or yeah, I could get them by 1:15 p.m. and be confident in their answer. If you don't have a system that can do that and you want to gain volume, don't expect us to figure that out for you. We're going to turn to the people who do have the ability to figure it out, and then they're going to get that increase in volume and those referred trips because they can reliably tell us whether they can handle it.
Yeah. The next question is around how do you get accepted into a broker network? Um, this is kind of difficult to answer depending on your area, the volume. It's a supply and demand type situation generally. That's how I handled it. What I always suggested when we got a new transportation provider looking to join the network was, what area are you in? And there potentially may not be volume to give, but likely there are areas of difficulty to land. And generally, that's the conversation I used to have is, okay, yep, you're in this area, but if you can go and set up, a remote location here, I have trouble landing certain volume on certain days, and that would help me, and then that would likely get you in the door. And to our point for last half hour is if you have good quality, you have low complaints, you are efficient and consistent, then you will be looked upon favorably by your broker and likely you'll grow just over time. So, but how do you get involved? You gotta keep kind of communicating and seeking the right people at the broker. Most that I know, there's a spot on their website that says you want to join their network. That's where I would start. At least get your name in the hopper. And then hopefully when you have a communication, you can demonstrate everything that we're talking about here. Then you have a higher likelihood of being able to join those networks.
And brokers like us have provider relations teams whose primary responsibility is to help you through that enrollment process so that you can understand what the requirements are to operate in the network, what the expectations are that associated with it. So, in most cases, either that interested in driving link or telephone number, if it's posted, reach out there and get the background on it. What it takes to be able to operate within a particular, and then at that point in time, become students. There's nothing that a broker wants to do than to tell you where its needs are and how to succeed successfully in conjunction with them. We're happy to give you that pathway and conversation. If you don't invest in those things, if you don't follow that advice, if you're not capable to do those, then things will decline there. But there's nothing we like more than to have a new member added to the network that is capable, prepared, and able to deliver on service, because the reality is I don't think there's a broker in the United States of America in any market that would say that their supply of NEMT operating vehicles exceeds the demand for the service. In reality, we're all trying to squeeze more trips than we have into vehicles they are. So if you can consistently, reliably be able to work with us and understand how to be able to take those trips, we're happy to work with you to make it and assist you to be successful.
And I guess I'll lend a little bit of experience and knowledge from not just the Q&A piece that's coming in right now, but also some brokers are very specific about wanting to have multi-vehicle fleets before you enter their markets. And so each broker is different, the pathway is different. It starts with communication. We get numerous phone calls almost daily asking that same question. How do I get into a broker network? How do I get judged to be viable to do this? And so there's communication's the first part. Pick up the phone before you start making investments. See what the broker needs. See where the resources are needed, because sometimes it's not in the middle of town. Sometimes it's on the outskirts. Sometimes it's in the rural areas, and you might be able to get some of those longer distance trips that are outside and beyond what you have availability for as far as mass volume in the urban area, and then those suburban areas can get you a little bit more distance. So it's a communication thing. Um, if there's other questions about starting organizations or how to grow your organization, if you look at the NEMTAC website on the resource page, there's a number of different tools. The first one that I refer everybody to, it says new provider checklist, but legitimately it's good for about the first 3 years. And it gives you the different elements that help you mature from a starting organization into a more mature organization. And you don't have to do every single step. It's not in a numerical order, but it's a matter of those are the things you should be thinking about for your organization as you mature. And that helps you get to the point where you might want to be in the NEMT provider registry, or you might be in a position where you're ready to start seeking accreditation. All of those are elements that help us as a third party recognize what you're doing. And you can use that when you go to the broker to say, not only do I have the technology and the reliability, but here's validation of that performance.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Here's one. Let's move on to the next slide, please.
I think this is me. This is really focusing on the five things that we strongly suggest that you all focus on. The 5-point maturity model. Having real-time visibility, GPS and AVL, as we kind of mentioned, for the most part, it's been optional. I would say nowadays it's really not an option anymore. You have to kind of have that, and soon to be required. So that goes without saying. A system-driven dispatch system, that will make you more efficient. Yes, software has a price tag on it, but becoming more efficient and be able to do more rides is also of extreme value to you, and it more than covers the cost of the software. Integrating with brokers is key also. That helps the broker and you as a transportation provider to get and receive and send completion data back to the broker more efficiently and without manual entry, which lends itself to potential errors. You don't want that. Credential management is key. William talked about this earlier. You really need to, that is a table stake. It's a minimum need in order for you to even have a conversation with a broker or to get a ride. If you don't have your credentials up to par, forget it. You're just not going to get any rides. It's not an option. It's in the state contracts, it's in the health plan contracts. The brokers are required to monitor it, and therefore they're going to monitor you, and they're going to expect you to help them with that. So you have to have those things in place. And then performance tracking is also as important. On-time performance is a measurement that all of those stakeholders that I mentioned before require and measure on. And if it's not met, there are penalties assessed down generally if things are too late or missed. Penalties are going to be given to a broker. And where does that happen? Happens at the transportation provider level that's actually driving these members to and from their appointments and needs. So the providers who consistently perform well with these elements generally are getting more volume. I can almost guarantee that.
And
Go
and
ahead. Yeah.
also relates back to the question about, hey, where do I invest my money at? I mean, obviously, there's various systems with various costs that do these things in a different way. I'll mention that the broker integration piece, if you're in a position to implement a system that has an integrated broker exchange as part of the component in conjunction with it, you want to talk about how do I pay for this system? Well, if you're integrated, one, your claims are going to be more accurate, so you're going to get fewer denied claims. Two, you're probably going to get paid faster because the integration is going to allow you to process your claims quicker and get it into our system faster. And three, you're going to do it with a heck of a lot less manual effort. So you don't need as much labor to get your trips submitted and get played in conjunction with them. So, just out of a digital maturity scorecard, out of 5 options we put on the screen, one of them is going to reduce your operating cost and increase your cash flow just by that functionality alone. So when we say that taking the time to invest in these types of systems, be able to understand what you're doing and being able to communicate us accurately about what's going on, they really can pay for themselves pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So with this one, how much does compliance factor into broker decisions?
I think mine has hidden capacity is what it's on the screen.
Gotcha. Yep. So most providers don't lack capacity, they lack visibility. Uh, how does that factor into the thoughts here?
Well, I think it definitely dovetails into what we've been sort of an overall theme here is that most brokers at heart are risk managers. And if we're in conversation with you and you're not sure where your vehicle is and you're not sure where it will arrive, and you're not sure about your availability to do other things, you're setting off our risk management alarms. And I can tell you that even in the best run, most efficient brokers, the people doing those routing calls are busy for a full 8 hours every day, constantly working, constantly reevaluating trips, constantly redistributing. They don't have time to call you on the phone and find out you don't know whether or not you can do what they called you about or not, or where your cars are, or what the current status of a current trip is. And so once they do that a couple of times, and you're unreliable and you can't give them that information accurately, you're going to slide down the list of who they call the next time that they need to be able to make those decisions, because they don't have time to waste with somebody who's uncertain. The other piece is that we get providers that call every day and they want a trip that looks like X, or they want a trip that looks like Y, or they want a trip that has a certain amount of miles in it related to their car. And we're happy to accommodate those when they're there, but we don't generate the trips. The trips get generated by the members that call in based on their appointment, their availability, and where they happen to be located. So we have the trips that we have. We have the need to deliver those trips we have. If you're waiting to cherry pick the perfect assignment from you, you're going to go into the bucket of the guys that go, hey, we'll call them when we run out of other options, because they only want to cherry pick the trips anyways. And one, there probably aren't going to be cherries that we're going to call you about. And two, you're going to lose out on a lot of opportunities while you're waiting. So understand what you can actually deliver and deliver reliability, communicate it effectively, meet that demand, and we're happy to fill your plate.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot to add to this other than, again, what William is suggesting here is, have your own kind of reporting and analysis to provide a broker, right? You want to show that you have the capacity in a particular area. And this ties to one of the questions that came up at the last one that I see open around rural area. And, how do you get rides there? We talked about communication. You got to get in front of the broker for sure, but can you demonstrate to them that you have vehicles in that particular area? They may not have volume, but as long as you're communicating, maybe they'll let you know where there might be another area that is needed. Um, certainly a broker can't make up volume. Goes back to supply and demand for sure. So you may think there's volume in a particular area, but maybe there isn't, or it's only certain days of the week or month that they do. So I always suggested to transportation providers like, okay, I may not have volume in your area, or I already have it covered. I already have a really good quality provider in that area. I'm not going to take it from them because they're doing well with it. The members love them. Why would I change that? But since you're asking, I need a few more drivers and vehicles here, which is, maybe 20 miles away or something. And can you help me do that? And, have that conversation with the broker. Kind of where I was going with all that is, having visibility again into your own data. You're probably noticing a theme here, but if you have your operation digitized, then you can report on that. You probably have an on-time performance report that you can show your broker. You probably have the number of complaints that came in and tracking that. So that will help you.
Yeah. And when you're having those conversations with a broker and you're talking with them about volume and volume increases, you need to understand what you need to be very specific about what you're asking for. You tell us a volume increase, we can't help you. When you go, hey, I've got a standing subscription trip that I take every Thursday at 2 o'clock out to this location, and I typically don't have any other uses for that vehicle after that. So if you have post 2 o'clock calls in this area, be happy to pick those up. That's actionable things that we can come back and go, hey, that's good to know. We'll look at what the charts are going forward. We'll be able to do that. We'll figure out a way to be able to fill your car while you're out in that location, knowing that it's available. When you call us and you go, hey, I'm short trips today, can I get some more trips? I mean, an organization like ours, we're moving as many as 10,000 trips a day. We don't have time to reshuffle the schedule because you didn't have a good plan to fill your cars up today. And we're not going to take particularly well in reliability when those calls come in conjunction with it. But when you can give us a specific gap and go, hey, I'm always open after 2 o'clock on Thursday because of this standing subscription, those are things that we know you understood, you quantified, you gave us information in a way that we can deal with out in advance. And then we're happy to work with you and figure out a way to fill that up. So when you can understand what your real availability looks like, quantify it, and communicate it, then we can help. When it's just, I need more trips, there's very little we can do for you for a blanket statement of more trips or longer trips. We can't really control that in that aspect. I see our next slide is about compliance. I know, as Ed mentioned previous in it, that's the only way to get in the game. We're not going to chase credentials for you. We're not going to excuse credentials out of it. It comes down fundamentally that we're audited for those things as well. Quite honestly, most of us, all brokers that I know of, aren't even available to submit claims if we can't prove compliance first. So your ability to track that, maintain those documents, produce them quickly, and not run up to deadlines. Because if, for example, if your certificate of insurance runs out on 5/13 and I don't have your new certificate of insurance yet, I can tell you already you're not on tomorrow's schedule or next week's or the months after that. And we're not even going to bother to start looking at you to put you back on the schedule until those documents arrive in our office. So know that you are committing to say, if you don't want to sign off on your certificate of insurance to the last day of its eligibility, you're probably not getting any trip for the next few days and minimal ones for the next week. Was it worth it? You'll have to make that decision for you. But we're not going to expedite it because you waited till the end or were unaware that a document expired.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty straightforward. It's part of the reason why NEMTAC started the provider registry, is to help address exactly that issue.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to slide 9. There we go. So guys, talk through this fixing the foundation, please.
Sure. So I think some of the basic setup on the front end is, and I know we beat a dead horse on this, but if you're still doing this manually, one, you're spending a lot of labor effort. Two, your data is probably not consistent, reliable, and timely. And we're working in point in times as brokers. So make sure that what you have has evaluative tools in it that can do things like, are my cars on time? Are they headed where they're supposed to be headed? Are we behind schedule? If we're behind schedule, how much are we behind schedule by? And can I communicate that so that if we, as a broker, know that, we can help fix the schedule and redistribute trips appropriately to deal with it. If we don't, we just consider that this is a provider that can't reliably deliver and just need less volume. Your ability to do that consistently. So if, it's one thing to be able to say, hey, there was a trip last week and here are my details. It's another to be able to consistently know where your cars are day after day, week after week, hour after hour, trip by trip, with data that comes back and says, I can show you, here's how the car got there. I can show you the time it pulled up at the front door, and I can show you the time that it pulled away and dropped them off at their destination. It's pretty hard to deny claims under those circumstances because you have, or issues or anything else that's related to it. And then, the biggie from the broker side is, when you see a problem, don't try to cover it up. Don't try to go, hey, just drive a little faster and drop them off. It's never going to work. At the end of the day, get on the phone and go, hey, we've had a schedule disruption. I need my schedule adjusted today to represent what's happening in conjunction with that. When you do that, you're not going down in volume with us. We're not dismissing you. We're acknowledging the fact that you have a good control of the volume that you're in. You ran into a problem today. It won't affect your future because you're watching it and you're appropriately responsible. When it happens day after day after day, or you can't tell us that, or you can't communicate those things to us on a timely basis, we assume the problem is you and your reliability. And then in terms of priority, the only way that we can deal with that in a risk management approach is to reduce the amount of business we do with you. So the first 30 days, I would say, is just focus on, how do I do those things, do them reliably, and do them consistently.
Yeah. And communicate.
And communicate about it. When we talk about the 30 to 60 today stuff, what you'll start seeing once you do that is, now brokers are talking to me about, can I do this? Can I do that? Do I have these abilities? Now you can start making choices about what make the most sense in your operation. And you can also figure out, where are my labor sinks? What am I spending a lot of time on that people are having to personally manually doing? And is there a way I can automate that function? AI and the tools that are being developed on a day-to-day basis are stunning in what they're consistently able to integrate, do for you. If you can take those things away, you make every trip more profitable because you are spending less time manually having to figure out things in conjunction with it. The end of every one of these is going to end with communicating. When you understand what it is, you can identify your gaps, then we can help you fill them. When you just call us and say you need more trips, we don't have any better idea what to do about that request than you did when you made it. So if you start analyzing that data, finding your trends, finding your gaps, finding your openings, finding things that are causing a problem or creating a benefit for your organization and communicating it on to us on a regular basis, hey, we can absorb that data and do something consistently and productively to help you. When it's just, hey, I just need more, we don't have a plan for more. We can help you develop a plan for, I need more X on Y day in Z location. That we can do. But you got to be able to know that information. You got to evaluate the data that you have, and you got to be honest and reliable about it. If you want a car to get 60 miles away from you for trips so that they can get longer mileage, you're not realistically looking at your data and planning on what you can do. What you want to do is optimize within what you're already doing.
Yeah, and I would say that there's probably a noticeable theme here. We're talking about data, we're talking about consistency, we're talking about efficiency, we're talking about AVL, um, being able to respond to complaints quickly, communication more than a couple times. All that is actually done a whole lot easier with software. There are lots out there. We represent one of them, so if there's anybody who, wants to go from manual to not and check all these boxes of the 30, 60, 90-day plan and all the things above to become more efficient and to demonstrate your capabilities to a broker that will allow you to grow, then, you should seek, the software out there, and we'd be happy to go into any of those if someone wants to have a conversation about that, to go deeper into how to solve these things. Is there?
I want to reiterate that you don't have to go and buy the most expensive, complex tool that's out there on the market. You can appropriately size both the budget, the dollars, and the functions and features to things that you want to be able to do. The important thing is that when you're working with a broker or you're working with a plan, or really you're even working with an individual facility, when there is an issue, when there's a question, where there's a concern, are you capable of giving a reliable answer to it on the spot? Because if you're not, you're raising uncertainty in the mind of whoever it is you're working with, and we're going to react to that uncertainty.
And I'll add one element to that. You also need to understand what it costs you either per mile or per hour to operate your vehicle. If you don't have that information, you're operating at a deficit. I see a lot of organizations that are asking the question, well, what do you charge in this market for this type of trip? And if you don't know what your cost is to provide that trip, you're also working your way into a position where you're buying something for $1 and selling it for 90 cents. And
Mm-hmm.
that will not lead to your success. Brokers generally have a pretty good idea of what it should cost you to do those things, and they're going to watch you start doing things that are not sustainable, and that will also impact your trips. So be wise about it. NEMTAC's currently doing a survey nationally, and we're seeing some really interesting information coming out of that. I look forward to being able to share that after it closes on Friday. So make sure that you're paying attention to what your costs are and that you're being very clear about it and that you're not working yourself into that negative situation.
Absolutely.
With all that said, there we go. If you need to get in touch with us, my information's up there. Um, William's information is there from WellTrans. Look forward to you guys connecting with them as well as with Ed. I
Yeah.
don't see any other questions or comments in the Q&A. So let me,
And you can always come visit us at NEMTAC, right? At the
yep,
annual conference.
I was gonna throw up some key takeaways here.
Okay.
Let me grab the controls here if it lets me. It might. It might not. Nope, it doesn't want to let me share. At least not the right one. Oh, there we go. So some key takeaways. We've talked about how brokers evaluate performance, what high performance providers do differently, some common operating gaps, the role of data and visibility and consistency, and practical operational strategies that you can use right now. Oops, that's not the right slide. Let's go to the next one, which is basically the same. How do you get us? I hope that you guys come visit us in Orlando, Florida, August 16th through the 19th at the JW Marriott. Um, Couple of websites for you there at the top. We have the nemtac.co website. The resource page there has all sorts of tools, not just from NEMTAC, but from various brokers, CTAA, et cetera, that help you as a provider optimize your organization. We talked a little bit about the National Provider Registry, and of course the NEMT Today magazine that has the a monthly newsletter that comes out, as well as a quarterly magazine with more in-depth articles. So, looking forward to seeing everybody there. Please sign up, register. The exhibit floor is already halfway sold out, and we have a bunch of folks that are already signed up. I see a couple of folks saying, "Yay, they're already signed up." So, thank you for doing that. We will see you guys at the next one. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was a pleasure talking with you.
You too. Thank you.